So, as you know, India has one of the oldest maritime traditions anywhere in the world. So, people learn about the Phoenicians and so on. But in fact, Indians have been sailing out in the Indian Ocean for thousands of years, going back to the Bronze Age during the Harappa period. And since then, Indians were sailing everywhere. We sailed through Southeast Asia. We sailed all the way through to Korea and China on one side, and up the Red Sea all the way to Egypt on the other side. And yet, we don't seem to celebrate this maritime culture enough. So, as you may know, I have been writing about this for a while. I have a book called The Ocean of Churn, which is specifically about our maritime history. So, as a part of this research, I began to look into what were the kinds of ships we were using to sail these places. And I discovered that Indians had a very particular sailing shipbuilding technique called the stitch ship technique, in which basically what they did is that instead of nailing a ship together, they would stitch it together. Literally, they would take planks, make holes along both edges, and stitch them together. And this technique of building ships was used from very ancient times. We don't know exactly when, but certainly for very ancient times. And this continued to be used all the way through to when the Europeans turned up in the Indian Ocean 500 years ago. After that, it went into decline. And today it is done in a few villages using this technique is used for local small fishing boats, but certainly no longer used for ocean going ships. So the technique is basically almost forgotten. But my idea was that, why don't we try and build a ship using this stitching technique? And so I did some research. And what we have done here, we looked at what is the oldest credible information of ships that we have, of ocean going ships. Yeah. Not to be confused with river boats, which are a totally different design. So there are depictions of Harappan river boats, and people try to extrapolate them to ocean-going ships. They are totally different designs. So the oldest one that we are 100% certain about is actually a Satvahana period coin. That is from the 2nd century BC. But that, unfortunately, doesn't have enough detail. It's just a light sketch on a coin. So we looked around and we found that there was a reasonably good depiction of a 4th or 5th century BC, 4th or 5th century AD ship in Ajanta. It's a painting. And so we looked at that. We looked at some texts. There are some texts which mention them. There are some testimonies of foreign travelers who came to visit India. So all of this, putting it together, and some living traditions that have somehow just about survived till today. So all of those put together, we have then designed this ship, INSV Kaundinya, which was inducted into the Indian Navy today, using all these traditional techniques. So basically, it's a 1,500-year-old design ship. So the designing of the ship, of course, meant a lot of research, as you can imagine. So we had to go and dig into what were authentic depictions of Indian ships. So there are several. There are some in Jagannath Puri temple. There is one in Mumbai of a naval battle, but those are of galleys. So you have to be very clear. What was I trying to do? I was looking at ships that were capable of crossing the ocean. So that means that these are not galleys with large number of rowers. You see, if you've got large number of rowers, then you cannot cross the ocean because, the Mediterranean is still a small place. You can have Roman galleys going back and forth. But if you're crossing large distances, you cannot have people rowing. So these have to be sailboats. And so we began to look at depictions. And as I said, we found this text also of dimensions, ratios, etc. And so then we began to put this together based on all these things, including the Ajanta painting. Then we had to look for somebody who was willing to build it. We found somebody in Bepur in Kerala. He's one of the last people who know at least the proportions of how to build these large ships. You see, people can build these small ships, but we have not built large ships using stitching technique for many generations. But luckily, what happened, there was somebody called Babu Sankaran, whose family has been building these kinds of ships for literally hundreds, if not thousands of years. And he had learned as a child the ratios for building these larger ships. And he's the last generation. His own children are not keen on learning this. So it is very key, very important that we use this last generation of people to do it and record the process as well, and all this knowledge. So we brought him on board. We needed a shipyard that was willing to do sailing ships. Remember, most ships now, very few yards do sailing ships. So we found Hodi, which had done Tarini, which is the Indian Navy ship that had done circumnavigation. So they were used to doing sailing ships. So we found somebody who was willing to do sailing ships, found a shipwright in the form of Babu Sankaran and his team, who were capable of working in wood, which Hodi had not done before. And then, of course, we needed financing. So financing came then, luckily, from the Ministry of Culture. So they were very kind to provide the financing for it. And then the Indian Navy was willing to take this up as one of their projects, because in the end, somebody has to not only see it through, but eventually sail it as well. Because the idea is not just to build a replica, the idea is to actually sail it. So the Indian Navy very graciously got on board. And of course, the shipping, we needed all kinds of regulations. Remember, we have to go through, and those regulations are not meant for these kinds of ancient ships. They're meant for modern ships. So then the shipping ministry also had to provide us certain exemptions to allow us to build these things, because this will not be to modern safety and other standards. So all of these came together. Many people, enthusiasts of all kinds who provided support. We had, inputs from various people, tidbits of all kinds, and then it's come together to the ship that you can see today. So you see, we have unfortunately come to think of our history as, first of all, uniquely landlocked. That whether it's the textbooks or even the conversation we have, we never think about our maritime presence. And at best, if you really push, somebody will say, oh, the Cholas went and did something in Southeast Asia. They won't even be clear what it is. So first of all, even the Cholas were very late in our maritime history. It's only 1,000 years ago, whereas we have been sailing the oceans for at least 4,000-5,000 years. Even in the Tamil coast, there were Pallavas before the Cholas who were sailing everywhere. So we know so little about it. So first of all, I of course wrote about this, but then once we began, the best way of really catching imagination is to demonstrate it by actually building a ship from that period, from 1,500 years ago, sailing it to distant ports and demonstrating that it can actually be done. And so that is the basic idea. I mean, the ship itself, this technology, is not built for any practical modern usage. I'm not attempting to, take containers back and forth on it. But the idea is to change our mindset that, look, we have this incredible maritime history, and we need to solve our sea blindness, which seem to suffer in whether it's our economic policies or even in our geopolitical outlook. We have this view that somehow we are trapped between two countries, Pakistan on one side and China on the other side. But in fact, if you take a maritime view of the world, it's a totally different world. Then our neighbors are Oman and Indonesia and Singapore and even Australia. These are our maritime neighbors. And, it's a very different world then. So you have to remember that this ship has a technology which is very, very old. So it has many features that do not exist in today's sailing ships. For example, because the hull is stitched together, it's actually flexible. Okay. So secondly, it doesn't have lantine, those triangular sails you see in modern sailing ship. It has square sails. Which has certain limitations that, it can only sail in the direction of the wind. It can't sail at an angle to the wind like, say, a lantine sail boat can. Then it doesn't have proper rudders. It's got steering oars or, lagging oars hanging out at the back, which again are not there in modern sailing boats. And of course, then the combination of all these and other features are also there. If you combine all of these, the handling quality of the ship is actually not known. So what we will have to do is to literally learn how to sail this ship. So a crew has been arranged, again, by the Indian Navy, a crew of about 18. So together with them, I will be trying to figure out how to sail it and how it handles out in the sea, and not just in normal seas. Remember, it has to be able to survive storms and rough conditions as well. So we will be attempting now. Of course, the monsoons have just hit. In fact, we had to inaugurate it in pouring rain. So we already have pre-monsoon. So during the monsoons, this it's not a great idea to attempting in very rough seas to try to learn. I mean, eventually we'll have to sail it in rough seas, but for the learning period, this is not good. So what we're going to do is we are going to sort of keep it in berth for the next few months. Then in middle of September, we will bring this out and then attempt to take it out and begin to sail it around in the seas outside Karwar, Goa area to learn how to sail it. I mean, for example, how do you turn a boat when you cannot do tacking, which is how sailboats are tacked? But when you can't really tack them in the way you do it with a lantern sail, how do you do it? We'll have to figure all these out. So assuming that we figure this out through, let's say, September, October, November, then the idea is then to do an international voyage. So about 2 years ago, when the His Highness the Sultan of Oman had come to India, the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji and His Highness the Sultan of Oman had made a joint declaration that the first voyage of INSV Kaundinya would be a voyage across to from Mandvi, which in Gujarat, to Muscat. Again, it is one of the traditional routes, and probably going back again to the Harappan period, this route has been used. So we intend to, maybe in December, we'll see how things pan out. But perhaps in December, we will attempt a crossing from Gujarat to Oman. In fact, the next voyage is even more ambitious. So if this voyage works out, because this is a 2-3 week crossing, obviously depends on the winds, but nevertheless, as voyages go, it's a medium length voyage, not a very long voyage. If this works out, we will attempt a more ambitious one from the beach near Konarak in Odisha and sail it to Bali, the island in Indonesia. This is also a very traditional route called Bali Yatra, which has also been done for thousands of years. There's, in fact, even today a festival done on Kartik Purnima called Bali, literally called Bali Yatra. So we will attempt that. Before we do that, we really need to know how to sail the ship, because that voyage will have to be done in November, which is also cyclone season in the Bay of Bengal. So we really need to know how to sail the ship, before we even attempt it. So what we have done is we have some safety equipment, of course. So if things go belly up, then we will be having some ability to make sure the people are safe. So safety equipment is there, which is modern. It will have a certain amount of signaling ability in order that, for example, other ships need to know that we are there in the path. And do remember that we have limited capability of changing our course. So if there's a large oil tanker headed our way, then it's the oil tanker's problem to change course. We can't do anything. So there are some modern things on board, but not in the general handling. So to the extent we can, we have kept it as traditional as possible.